isn't even any connection to spiritual maturity at all. It's a different kind of maturity, and it's not the one that you want. And so he starts off pretty hard in verse 3. Man, this time on my phone drives me crazy. I'm just going to start bringing my hard Bible. But then in verse 17, he says, but, and he describes the wisdom that is from above. He said, the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, which again, he's spent time on partiality before, and without hypocrisy. The Christian Standard Version says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peace-loving, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, and without pretense. If we take from this point forward to really the end of chapter 4, you can see kind of three primary transformations that he wants them to go through, right? He wants them to go from hatred, and the activities that he's describing are founded in their hatred for one another or hatred to other people. At the end of the day, and he wants them to turn that to humility. And we studied this concept of judgment, right, where they're being partial and judgmental. He wants them to turn judgment into justice. He wants them to be just. And inside justice is impartiality. And there's a boasting component to this, and he wants them to turn that into just foundational belief. And so if you think about the foundations for a healthy church, these are your options. These are really your options on what a church can be founded on. And let me ask you a question. Can a church have justice but still have hatred and boasting? It can. Yeah, I mean, you might have just a social justice church that's filled with the other stuff. Can a church have humility and have judgment and boasting? Probably not as likely, because humility is a foundational element, right? I mean, you kind of start with humility. Can a church have really solid belief and have judgment and hatred? I'm not just talking about belief that acknowledges. I'm talking about a faith, a deep and abiding faith. Not this type. These things are not going to show up where this is. Where one of these shows up, the three are generally together. Where one shows up, the other two are going to show up.
So for me, I think there's another level above this. Who are we? Are we a physical being having a spiritual experience?
Yeah.
Are we a spiritual being having a physical experience? I think if we think this is our life, we're going to operate off of that side of the board.
Yeah. You're describing transformed. This is not transformed. This is transformed. This is a physical being trying to be spiritual. This is a spiritual being existing in the physical. Always, unfortunately, being drawn to this because of our fallen nature, right? Because we are physical beings, we're spiritual beings in the physical, we feel this pull all the time. And I would call our church, not perfect, but I would call our congregation on this side of this equation. I would say we are. We were born. I don't know if anybody's in the room that was here when this church was born back in 95. Anybody? Yeah. We were born out of this. I'll tell you right now, because I was a deacon. We were born out of this. We left this. We left this.
But isn't that the journey every Christian makes? Ultimately, before we find Christ, aren't we on that?
Yeah, but we're not talking about that journey. We're talking about the journey when you're on this side and you're acting like this. I would say, yeah, you're right. That's the journey we start. But he's saying to them, this isn't the journey you're supposed to be on. You're supposed to be on this journey. I mean, these are supposed to be mature Christians, and he's having to describe to them what spiritual maturity is, what wisdom from above is. He's having to describe it to them. And he describes it as these things. And we're going to talk about, tonight we won't get as far as I thought we were. We're going to talk about each of those 8. Here's the thing, as we do it, as we talk about it, I want us to really reflect about ourselves. Me too. Because there are times in our lives, as Christians, as members of grounds, when things aren't going the way we think they should, we might disagree with the way things are going on, we might be upset about stuff that's going on, we might be frustrated with another member, another set of members, whatever it is, when we're feeling that, we're still called to be inside these 3 things and these 8 things. So the question becomes, and I think this is the primary lesson from this section in James, when that's happening to us, when we're feeling that pull to hate, that pull to be judgmental, or the boasting thing, I don't think we have a big boasting problem, but maybe the pull to be self-righteous. We're supposed to be in this list. That's the question, like when I'm feeling the pull to be judgmental, how do I stay peaceful? How do I stay peaceful? How do I stay submissive? Like, how do I handle my anger and frustration, but stay full of mercy, stay submissive, stay considerate, stay all of those things in all my interactions inside, because it's talking about how they're treating one another, right? That's not easy. And it's not a small thing. Because when a church starts to go through starts to feel the pull to this, and this stuff either didn't exist or starts to disappear or gets stressed really hard, that's bad. That the church is at risk at that point. The congregation is at risk. And so I want us to be a people, like when we leave James, I want us to be a people that says, this is my list. This is my list for my life. I want to be filled with spiritual wisdom, and he says this is spiritual wisdom. Do you want to be filled with spiritual wisdom? I mean, I'm asking you. It's not a rhetorical question. Yeah, if you don't, let's visit afterwards. But yeah, I want to be filled with spiritual wisdom. Do I do all of these things well 100% of the time? No. Some I do, some I don't. Some remain, are too aspirational. So let's go through them. So he says this is the wisdom that comes from heaven. And these are basically the characteristics that he describes, right? Which is, what does this feel similar to? And we've talked about this. What does this feel similar to in the Gospels? That's Galatians 5. Feels similar to the fruit of the Spirit. You're right. So I think Paul's influence is there. But I'm talking about in the Gospels. What is this Sermon on the Mount? They're actually very much the same elements as the Sermon on the Mount. Not a perfect parallel, but a very, very close parallel. So first, it's pure. What does pure mean? What does it mean, wisdom that is pure? What is it? Okay, undefiled by worldly influences. Okay. I like that. Directly inspired by God, undefiled by worldly influences. Anybody else? Clean of evil. That would be another way of saying, yeah, void of earthly and worldly influences. Anybody else? Yeah. They're not present. Yeah. So it would be the opposite. Yeah, of those things. What's the culture's mindset on all 8 of these? Just repeat that everyone we go through. It's hard and it's countercultural, right? Not even close. So what does our society say about purity now, today? Especially, yeah. Right. This is silliness, weakness. What does it say? Look at social media. What does the world say about peace loving? I mean, just look now at what's happening politically. What does it say about being considerate? It's all the same. I think I think some you'd be rightly, some would. I actually think some, with maybe a couple of exceptions, would actually say I agree. But what they'd really mean is I'm going to be peace loving if you're like me. But if you're not like me, in whatever context they want to define that, then I'm not going to be peace loving. I'm going to be considerate until you're not like me or you disagree with me, and then I'm not going to be considerate anymore. This list is irregardless of how we're treated. This is how we're supposed to be, irregardless of how we're treated.
That's actually a great point. One that I was going to bring up too is that many people today are living in an inherited worldview that they don't know the origins or the foundations of. So they love the idea of peace loving. They love the idea of maybe even purity if in a certain context. Or they love the idea of being especially considerate.
Or they love the idea of good,
Or good,
but they can't define it.
They can't define
Right.
it, and they don't understand where those fruits come from. And so we should actually, the wisdom that he's talking about is us as Christians being able to see through that veil and find the common ground with them, and then try and be like, hey, listen, you say you like this, but here's why that is actually good. Here is the thing.
Yeah, I saw something, again, one of those man with the mic things with one of the guys I can't remember the name of that you guys, Charlie Kirk. I think this one was Charlie Kirk. And the guy at the mic was an atheist. He said he was an atheist, and what was he talking about? I can't remember the exact subject, but basically, and I watched it for about 5 minutes because I was curious what was going to happen. And what the man was trying to do was establish a moral standard without a moral lawgiver. And Charlie Kirk, all he had to do was keep asking why. So all you have to do is keep asking why. Well, you need to be good. Well, what do you mean by good? Who defines good? And the guy would stammer and stutter, and then he'd try to define good, and he'd say, well, but why? Why should I follow that standard? What's the moral basis for what you believe? And the man couldn't do it. As you would anticipate, he couldn't do it. Let me ask you a question. Are we supposed to do these things to be seen by God? Or are we supposed to do these things for people to see God? I think it's both, but I think the second one is primary.
There's scripture for what you just said. As far as be the light in the world.
Yeah, of course.
Be the example for others in the.
And this I think is inside being the light, but it's in the context of James, it's inside our relationships with one another. That's primarily what James is talking about. He says, if you want to have a healthy church that is the church of Christ, and I'm not using that as a proper name, I'm just saying, if you want to be in a church that is the church of Christ, then this is what you need to be exhibiting, each of you individually. You have to be. Relationally, you have to be. And so a lot of good stuff said. The author talks about pure, sacred, some other words he uses are sacred, holy, able to be clearly seen. So if you think like, if you think like putting something in a bottle of pure water, you know, it's not, there's no cloudiness, you know, you're able to see it very, very clearly. And so this concept that we have to have purity across everything in our life. Second, we need to be peace-loving or peaceable. Does anybody ever struggle with this? In what context do you generally find yourself struggling? With, like, I'm saying when you feel yourself not wanting to be peaceable. What's the context?
For me, it used to be as far as the anger. You know, one thing would happen, I'd get angry. Another thing would happen because I was angry, and I'd get even more angry. And it would just snowball
Been there, done that.
into a giant anger ball.
But I'm asking, the original thing that generates the anger, and you're just saying at a time you had trouble with anger, it could be anything. Yeah.
And you can't be peaceable or peaceful with anyone else if you don't have it.
Yeah, that's fair, and peacefulness is found in Christ. But what do you? Anybody else? What? An injustice. Okay. Injustice. Anybody else? Dave? I hope driving. So, okay, little side note. I got a dash cam. Because of Desiree's accident, I decided I was going to get a dash cam. I'm testing it in my truck, and then I'm going to get one for the van, and I'm decided I'm going to get one for the van. It's made me a better driver. Because I feel like somebody's watching me. They aren't, but if something happens, there's a dash cam. And so I find myself like just kind of calming down. So just a side note. Anybody else? Like what? There's an obvious one nobody's got yet. Yeah. Well, they can. No. They can watch me. I don't think they're watching me 24/7, but they can watch me. I'm with you on that. Your hand was up. No. Okay, no. You were. What? Come on. What's the one right now? I'm off of peace. I'm sorry. I'm on peace loving. I was thinking pure when you said peace. What do I mean by peace? Well, in this context, peace loving means to be not seeking conflict. We'll see what he says. Peaceable would be another way to say it. Not cause problems and quarrels. Again, in this context, when you feel yourself approaching a quarrel or something that could be a quarrel, that you try to be a peacemaker or peaceable with it, right? So not try to lean into the quarrel or accelerate the quarrel.
So we're not talking about the godly exemplified.
No, we're talking about our behavior. What's the obvious one?
I would say the biggest struggle I've got with that one is if I'm trying to share the word with somebody and they start talking this and it's like, oh, I gotta stay calm, stay right here on this, and stay focused right where I need to be. That's my biggest struggle with the peace.
Okay. Anybody else? Oh, me.
Well, I think we need to
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
that we can disagree with somebody and still not be hateful or mean.
Yeah, that's
And it don't
peaceable.
make them stupid.
Yeah, it
It
doesn't.
just means they may have a different opinion.
Yeah, for sure. That would be, I think, would also leak into considerate, for sure. Well, for me, it's Bertie. Agreement. Ah. There you go. Yeah. So this is actually one that shows up in coaching conversations I have with leaders that have struggles with difficult conversations. Like when they know they're going to have a difficult conversation with an employee about performance or something, and they'll delay, wait too long to have the conversation, or they'll struggle with the conversation. I think this one's kind of inside that. I want to be really clear. Being peaceable doesn't mean you have to be in agreement. Peaceable is not agreeable. We're not talking about agreeable. We're talking about being peaceable. You can actually be in disagreement peacefully, right, with consideration. I actually historically have struggled with that, but I'm getting a little bit better. What about, for me, it's when I read, it's when I'm reading something that's inside the hyper politicized, or the hyper, what's the word? I lost the word. Divided, not, I don't know, I lost the word. Polarized, thank you. I couldn't think of it. Senior moment. Political world. When somebody tries to make a point about something that I disagree inside that realm, and I can see no reason, no logic, nothing inside of it. Like I can see nothing but feelings. I can feel it. I can feel the anger, the desire to argue. I can feel it bubble up. And so all of us have plenty of opportunities in our life where we can be not peaceable, whether they're inside family relationships or whatever they are. Inside the context of the church, we are supposed to be people, like in our relationships with one another, we're supposed to be people that love peace. that love peacefulness with one another. Now, one thing I will say, I don't want to generalize, but one thing I'll say about fairgrounds, in my personal opinion and experience, is one of the things we could grow in is how to disagree peacefully. I think for us, sometimes when there's disagreement, we have a tendency to avoid it because we don't want there to be disagreement. And so we don't know always how to handle it. And to be able to handle it peacefully and agree to disagree and still love one another and do all that, I think that's an area we could just work on and grow in. And passive aggressive is not peaceful. It's not peaceful. Yeah, it might be calm. It's not peaceful. Lots. Yeah. Right. What's right, right. Right. Well, and I'm really good. But I think that was mentioned earlier, kind of bringing peace to yourself. I think that's when we get later, we read it in chapter 4, verse 7 through 10. He talks about submitting ourselves to God. And that's what that is, right? When you submit yourselves to God, the very first result of that is just that peacefulness in yourself. Because you're resisting the devil. Those are your two choices with how you're going to find peace in your life. You can submit to God and resist the devil, or you can yield to the devil. Those are our two choices. Like, there are no other choices. And he's saying, submit, resist the devil, draw nigh unto God in verse 9. And what? He'll draw nigh unto you. Again, the result is peacefulness. Purify your hearts. He said, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. I think that's how James describes that effort at that first concentric circle of peacefulness. I would agree wholeheartedly. Here's the interesting thing, too. And I kind of lost my train of thought, Andrew, with what you're saying, but when we're feeling that, like, that the peacefulness is far away, like when we're feeling the struggle with the peacefulness, the non-peaceful behavior, how frequently will it reflect impartiality, submissiveness, mercy, fruitfulness, sincerity? It won't reflect those things. It will reflect the opposite of those things. So this one, I mean, they all connect to one another, but this one's it's a big one, and I think it was a big one to the audience here. 30 says the wisdom that is from above is considerate, which would mean it's gentle, it's fair, that we have a concern for one another. That should be our base. That should be our baseline in how we see each other. Like the feeling of resentment should not be a feeling that you have for anybody in this church. personally. Like there should be no feeling of resentment for anybody. And if there is, you got to go to that person and reconcile it, right? Matthew 18, 18. You got to go reconcile it. And so the feeling that we should be having, the way we should be treating one another is with gentleness, fairness, consideration, to be considerate with one another and to those outside of us. Mm-hmm.
This is a body, and if we have our own bodies, and there's a cell at war with another cell, we call that cancer.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And it'll lead to death if we don't take care of it.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so it's the same thing inside of this body.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree. That's a good illustration.
Just something to do with anything in the future. Cancer is cells growing out of control, isn't it? Like a whole bunch of cells growing and growing and growing.
It's abnormal cells that are replicating and are not responding to the immune system response. Yeah. But yeah, they can grow out of control for sure because they don't have the mechanism for the immune system to respond to them. I'm not a medical person. Somebody else could answer better than me. So the fourth one, I think, might be the one we struggle with, like just generally as humans, and maybe especially in our own society. The one we struggle with the most is that he connects submissiveness with wisdom. This one kind of hurts. The words that this author uses with submissiveness, he says, reasonable, compliant, obeys easily. Why is submissiveness? Well, why is it on the list and why is it so important? Yeah, we have the perfect example of submissiveness, right? I mean, that Christ was perfectly submissive. The reason he went to the cross is because he was submitting. He was submitting to God's plan for reconciliation and redemption. Couldn't happen without that submissiveness.
You are surrendering to God's will. Like with Jesus being arrested before the crucifixion, he didn't tell the disciples not to fight. He didn't fight. Christians going into the Roman Colosseum being eaten by lions. They went willingly. They surrendered to the will of God.
Yeah. In this context, what is the submissiveness? Specifically in the context of James. Now, we know, and I think we'd all agree, we have to be submissive to God. In the context of James, he's talking about wisdom, and wisdom specifically in their spiritual maturity and how they're dealing with one another. Who's he saying they should be submissive to? Each other. I mean, yes, God, that's a given. But I think the context is primarily one another. Anybody like somebody telling you what to do? Doug's got his hand up. He likes it.
And obviously, we have to realize this in the context of Christians. When you hear submissive, and you think of what has been passed around in the political arena and all the other things, that's another story.
Right.
For another day. But he's talking about how you should treat another Christian.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The context of James is our relationship. Now, there's other contexts where we're talking about a submissive relationship with the state and what that looks like and why we do that. But you're right. In this particular context, and that's what I was alluding to, is that he's talking primarily about our relationships with one another. Is that any easier? What does submitting to one another actually look like? Being humble. Humble is a characteristic. It's not an action. Reasonable is a characteristic. Tell me what an action that I can observe. What does submission look like with an action that I could observe a person doing? Okay, putting somebody before myself. Okay, could be helping somebody. What else?
I think the biggest problem is submissive
You had to go there, didn't you? You had to go that submit.
You gotta know that, but I like to bring that up.
My wife's not here.
Problem with that, my 61 years married.
I'm 40 years next month, George. I think we got it.
I got one.
Yep.
Chapter 1, verse 19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath,
Okay.
which all could be rolled into.
Could be. Yeah. Yeah. What about if you and I, they're all good. What about if you and I are in disagreement? And let's say I'm in disagreement with you and I'm an elder. So technically I'm in a position, and again I'll put air quotes, I'm in a position of authority and I'm in disagreement with you. What does submission look like there? Well, of course, yeah, we should still love one another. Could it be that I yield to what could I just be that I decide to yield to your point of view and whatever, because I want to submit to that, to you in that particular case. It's not catastrophic. It's okay that I disagree. I mean, how often could we do that where we just like what's the term? I think sometimes in our lives, in our relationships, I know in our marriages, like we look out on the horizon and we see 10,000 hills we're willing to die on when there's really 4. Like in the whole horizon, there's probably 4 that I should be willing to die on, and I see 10,000. And I think if we had a whole church, like whole congregation full of people that are just ready to submit to one another, because there just isn't frequently a hill that we need to die on, right? That church is going to blow up. It's just going to blow up. It's just going to blow up. Dave and then Andrew.
I keep looking at all of them. I keep seeing a patchwork quilt, very finely tied together. The submissiveness doesn't work well.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. Well, you don't have that. You don't have that. That's for sure. You don't. If you don't have mercy, you can't be submissive. They're all tied. Yeah. I'm very linear, and so I drew this in a list of 1 to 8 because my mind is linear. But it's not a 1 to 8 list. You're exactly right. It's like you called it a quilt. It's actually like a machine that can't work without any one part, right? If any one part breaks, it's like the machine doesn't work. Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly.
Doesn't it come back to perspective? The point was made earlier that we rush in to help something that's in trouble. We submit to their position at that point in time. So it's perspective.
And again, please don't. I actually think some of the things that were described, I would put more like in the considerate category. The submit one is where you're actually, like frequently if you're submitting, you're making an emotional and mental sacrifice in your mind. Like you're actually doing something intentionally to yield to another person. And so they're not far apart, but I'm going to go Andrew and then Brent.
So I think wrapped up in the concept of submission, and don't misunderstand this, there is a element of obligation or duty.
Hmm.
I don't think that is a dirty word.
Oh, no.
Think of duty sometimes as like, oh, I gotta do this. But no, it's actually can be a beautiful thing. Especially when you use the example of the elder. You being an elder and submitting maybe to somebody in the congregation or vice versa. There's also levels of submission. A king, for instance, ideally, a good king, has a level of duty and obligation to his subjects as much as they have a duty and obligation to him. He can't just abandon
Right.
his
Right.
throne. In
Yeah.
the same way,
The obligations are different.
the obligations are different.
Right.
The duties are different.
Right.
But that's where the submission element is part, because the king submits to his treasure and his body in battle. A good king will submit those things for his people, and his people will do that for him. And Jesus Christ, as the ultimate king, King of Kings, he did that very act himself.
You made me think. Yeah, you made me think. I'll give you an example that I think, for me, is personal. Um, when you're the CFO for a privately held company, you're often giving financial advice to the owner that crosses over just the company, but you're kind of embracing his or her personal world, and you're trying to help them be good stewards for their family and for the business, and the business employs a bunch of people, and you want that to be safe. That owner can do whatever they want to do. They're the only owner of the company. They don't have to take anybody's advice. They can do whatever they want to do. I have had occasion in my life where I know where I gave advice to an owner that I felt was advice that was the best advice for the well-being of the company and the long-term well-being of he and his family, that he yielded to, even though he didn't want to. He wanted to make a different decision in the moment. But he actually submitted to me. He did not have to. But he honored my whatever, my expertise or my experience or whatever, what he actually hired me to do, my counsel. Now, there were lots of times he didn't. It's okay. So if you think about that in the context of just relationally with one another, if we have a mind of, if a spirit of humility, it's going to be a natural, mindful submissiveness. I'm having trouble articulate it, but Hannah? Yeah, absolutely. Now, I will say, I'm really glad you brought that up. So I think the risk is I can build my relationship. We talk about it vertical and horizontal, right? I have a vertical relationship with God through Christ, and I have a horizontal relationship with God through His church, through my relationships. I have to build both. And that's what I think Andrew or somebody was just saying. While I'm building this, none of this is all really hard if I'm not in relationship with my body of Christ. If I'm not in relationship with all of you here, this is so much harder. You just said it. I have to be in a relationship of trust, vulnerability. I was going to talk about that later. I talked about before, vulnerability, all those things that then, if I'm willing to make myself vulnerable, then I'm willing to be submissive. I'm much more willing to submit, right? And we're talking about a healthy submissiveness, not an unhealthy submissiveness. Okay, so you're willing to submit to God and His authority and willing to submit to one another. Derek?
So I kind of see a parallel between the peace love is not your agreement for everything. Submissiveness does not mean you're just doing what someone wants just to make them happy.
Of course not, yeah.
Philippians, talk about intimate Christ humility, and I think a great description that I would use for submission would be considering others better than yourself. It's like this: you give first your things. If you're peace loving or you're a peacemaker, if you're first your things. Instead of coming from I'm right, or instead of saying this dismissive approach would be assuming I'm actually your best interest.
Yes. So this is the wisdom that is from God. Let's not forget that. That's what this list of, don't want to get in the forest for the trees, lose the forest for the trees. That's what you're saying is, all of this is because of that submissiveness to God. If you are, and Hannah, as you pointed out, if you're truly submitting to God, if you're truly submitting to Christ, this should be the fruit of that submission. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have to be intentional in working on it. We do. We have to be very intentional in working on all of it. Obviously, if we're not, then we get the church that James is dealing with because of this pull. Just remember, we're always being pulled in this direction. Always. Now, it's easier for some of you than others. It might be harder for me to resist that pull and require more work. You may be at a level of spiritual maturity that it's easier for you. God bless you. The pull is always there. And so it's not just as simple as, well, I'm just going to submit to God. Well, yeah, but that submission to God is continual work, and it's like a loop that circles back on itself. When I'm submitting to God, this should be the fruit of that. When I'm intentionally working on this, I'm submitting to God. Does that make sense? It feeds on itself. The maturity occurs, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, being in the body of Christ, thought is, like if I disagree with them, well, you're stupid or you're ignorant or you don't know anything. But because we're all in the body and we're all subject to death without Christ, I have to be submissive enough to know that he may not get it yet. I may not get it yet. But I'm willing to love him anyways because we're in the same boat. We're all going towards the cross. We're all going towards eternity with God. So
Well, and yeah.
I've got more consideration for the family of God than I do for a stranger.
Well, and I think, again, some of this circles back to also, help me out, where is it? Is it in Corinthians, where it talks about the more spiritual mature submitting to the less spiritual mature? You know where I'm talking about. I think it's related to that. Like, you made me think of it when you said, I may not know, he may not know. And sometimes my submission is to help somebody else on their spiritual maturity journey, right? My submission is actually for them so that they can learn greater spiritual maturity. Now, an example of that doesn't come to mind, but I think you know what I'm saying. I'm going to end there because usually it takes us a little while to get the prayer requests. I think it was a better class because we had the ladies in here. So I think that should be the norm. I think we should just abandon the ladies' class and have everybody in here.
They can be submissive.
George, I can't take George anywhere.